Welcome back to the Samong Gang Outdoors podcast. I'm your host, Samong, joined by co-host Nate. As always, we're excited to have you guys here this week in celebration of rifle elk season, not just here in Washington, but for quite a bit of states. We want to talk about rifle elk hunting in the general season. But before we get into the bread and butter of that, we have to share our gratitude to those that support us.
Absolutely. A couple companies that really stand behind us with this podcast. The first one is Onyx Hunt. This is an awesome online mapping software. Use it on your phone, use it on your desktop. Download the offline maps on your phone so when you're out of service, you still can get all of your topography, all of your satellite imagery. And one cool feature that they have is you can download recent satellite imagery, which will give you kind of like Google Earth has through the years. You can look at a place. So with burns or clear cuts, just one of those little features that's hidden in there.
Code SY20 to save on your Onyx Hunt subscription. Also, we want to thank Vortex Optics. They have you covered when it comes to your binoculars, rangefinders, rifle scopes, spotting scopes, you name it. Anything with glass, optical quality, Vortex Optics is just Vortex has been my go-to. And I highly recommend them. And if you shop at eurooptic.com, that is EURO optic.com, use code SY10 to save you some cash on all Vortex Optics products.
And lastly, Tacticam's Reveal cell camera series. These are cell game cameras. They are awesome. They are great products, reliable, high quality, really easy app to interface with. And this is just one more step you can take in your scouting journey. Helps you learn land. Also with the cell cam features, you don't have to bugger up a place week in and week out, changing SD cards and batteries, hook the cameras up to a solar panel, and let them sit and let the area go back to its natural habitat.
That's right. Nate, we love elk. But you know what we love more than elk?
What's that?
Trivia Duel. Did you like that one?
I like that one. I didn't know we were going to go with that.
Folks, if you're new here, we have a game that we play. It's called Trivia Duel. And simply, I ask Nate a question. He has to answer it, vice versa. This is just a little lighthearted game that we play here. We'd love your help. Email us at triviaduel@syoutside.com. That is trivia, DUEL, not DUAL. So Trivia Duel with an E at syoutside.com. We'd love your help with Trivia Duel and Fast Facts.
Yeah.
With that said, let's get into this.
All right, go for it.
All right.
By the way, I thought you were going to say mule deer when you asked what we love more than elk.
That would have bon a great one, but I'm not trying to get my podcast canceled here. Because it is elk week, we love elk more than mule deer. Well, I decided to stay on the special topic of elk, so that's what my trivia question is. And this one, you can really just, cross off the wrong answers because there's really not a lot of answers. So here's my trivia question. Elk bone density fluctuates throughout the year. What season are elk bone the least dense?
I'm going to have to say that they are the least dense during the summer.
Final answer?
Final answer. Let me explain why I think that. So
Okay.
If I'm wrong, I don't sound like a lunatic.
Go for it.
My guess is that they're least dense during the summer is that because the summertime, or I shouldn't necessarily say the summer, I should say their antler growing season, is that the nutrients, a lot of the same ones like calcium that go to your bone deposits and create better bone density are getting diverted to the antler growth.
This is why you should never ask a nurse about body stuff. Well, you're pretty much spot on. So the answer is technically like spring, early summer, which I think summer falls right in there too. And you basically nailed it. So elk bone, and we're not talking about antler, we're talking about the actual anatomical bones inside the body of an elk here, is the least dense during the period of rapid antler growth, which is spring and summer, and also during lactation in cows, which is also spring and summer. This happens because that is when the minerals are in the highest demand because, like you said, they're now no longer just utilizing that mineral that go into their body, and they have to expand that mineral nutrient somewhere else. For bulls, it's their antler growth. For cows, pregnant cows, it's their calf.
Mm-hmm.
So because those minerals are no longer going directly to the bone, those bones are simply getting less minerals. So this process is actually called osteoporosis.
Mm-hmm.
And that, simply put, is the process when bone mineral density and bone mass are decreased. So it's true, because if you guys have ever looked at like elk in the summertime and you just see them like rib cage and, just really skinny, it's kind of what it is. They're just trying to grow other places.
This is kind of one of the phenomenon that happens, I would assume, with animals too, but with humans, with moms and their young, is when they're pregnant, either in utero or they have a new baby and they're feeding the baby with with milk, with lactation. The number one priority of nutrients that mom ingests goes to the baby. So the first pass, per se, was what people call it. The first pass of nutrition goes either to the baby that's pregnant, that she's pregnant with, or to the baby that's feeding, and then the mom basically gets the leftovers. So it's pretty unbelievable.
Fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
Well, you nailed it.
Alrighty, I got you here. When was the Boone and Crockett founded? This is the Boone and Crockett Foundation, the Boone and Crockett Club. I'll give you 4 options.
Okay.
Is it 1860, 1887, 1901, or 1914?
1860, 1891.
So 60 or 87.
Okay.
And then 1901 or 1914.
I'm going to go with 1867.
That wasn't an option. 60 or 87.
Oh, 87. Oh, I thought you said 60 or 7.
Oh.
Okay.
1860 or 1887?
1887, final answer.
1887 is correct.
Okay. That was a complete guess. I did not know that.
1887, the Boone and Crockett Foundation was founded by Theodore Roosevelt and George Grinnell. And one interesting thing about the Boone and Crockett is a lot of times people think about it as the trophy hunting club.
Mm-hmm.
Boone and Crockett, if your animal makes that score, that's a really impressive thing. But back in the early 1900s and the late 1800s, Boone and Crockett Foundation was foundational in the creation of legislation for some of the first national parks, including Yellowstone, Glacier, Denali, and Grand Canyon, which now are notoriously places that don't offer hunting. And so really, where the Boone and Crockett Foundation has its roots is in conservation. And that's just such a huge testament to how trophy hunting and proper trophy hunting and proper animal conservation and management is true conservation.
Wow. Boone and Crockett. I wonder when the Pope and Young Club started.
Next week, you'll find out.
I'm excited for that one. Nate, elk hunting.
Elk hunting.
I have a love-hate relationship with this one.
Here's what I think we do. I think we tell a story about elk hunting from the big bull that you killed.
The only big bull I've killed.
Because successful stories from elk hunting in Northeast Washington don't come around that often. And so when they do, they're worth being told in the entirety. We can take what we can learn from them. And then after that, we can set the harsh reality of what Northeast Washington general season rifle elk hunting really is. Not to be too much of a downer.
This podcast is about to crush more dreams than make you have a dream. Now, if you guys have not listened or you guys missed the Bearded Brothers podcast that was released back in August, I do encourage you guys to go listen to it, because Colin and Clayton, they're a wealth of knowledge. But that podcast really honed in on archery season in September. This week, we want to touch on rifle season, which is in effect right now. Mm-hmm. And we want to touch on it because a good majority of you guys are going to be out there. We're out there as soon as we're done with these podcasts. But as Nate said, to give some context to rifle elk hunting, and for those of you who are new here, the general season in Washington is essentially statewide. You have your Western Washington general season hunts, you have your Eastern Washington general season hunts, but Nay and I, because we live here in Spokane and we spend most of our time in Northeast Washington, we have the most experience out of here. And so simply we have more stories, more experience out of this particular region. It does not mean that you cannot kill an elk on a general tag, like in the Blue Mountains or towards Central Washington or on the coast. You can absolutely kill elk there. In fact, you probably have a higher chance to kill elk there than in Northeast Washington. But because this is our backyard and this is what I feel like does not have that much resources out there, we kind of just want to be a stepping stone for some of you that might be getting into it, because every year, this is the hardest hunt that I have. And I don't care if I'm doing it with an archery or bow, muzzleloader, or a rifle. It's the same region, it's the same elk herd, it's the general tag on public land. It's just sometimes it feels like nearly impossible. Sometimes it is impossible. With that context out of the way, hopefully you guys then understand the significance of the bull that I killed here in Northeast Washington back in 2022. So this bull, he's actually hanging next to us in our podcast studio right here. And he's next to my blacktail and my mule deer. And this is a 6x6 typical bull. Boone and Crockett officially scored. He grossed 324 and 5/8. So for those of you that don't know anything about score or just unfamiliar with elk,
That's a masher.
anytime you get into that 300 mark of an elk, like it's usually considered a big bull, right? You have a 300. If you cross that 300 threshold, it's a big bull. It's a great bull.
And not only is this a high scoring bull, but it's also a very mature animal.
Yes,
as you know from your history with it.
And that's something we'll touch on in the podcast. So that's just some little context to the score. Like, I don't really go shoot an animal based off a score. I go out and honestly just shoot whatever gets me excited. Here in Northeast Washington, I just shoot whatever elk has an antler. So it's not like I'm after a 300 class bull. But I'm just saying that to add more context to why later on you guys will know why I was bawling like a kid after I found this bull. Okay, so like a 325 public land over-the-counter general season elk in Washington, especially in Northeast Washington, is a rarity. Now, there's ample of them walking around, but man, to have it all come together, it's pretty rare. So I killed this bull in 2022, but I want to go rewind and go in the years before, because this is kind of a prime example of how important it is, and we'll touch on this later, of repetition in the woods and scouting. Because this bull, the day I killed him, this was not the first time I laid eyes on this bull. Okay, like this is kind of the pinnacle of everything coming together. So I killed this bull in 2022. My cousin Kong, he has his 2020 sheds. In 2021, I saw him. Okay, so I want to go. So in 2019, this is like the first year where I hunted this one particular region or like this little area very seriously. So I started, my first year bow hunting was in 2017. And it wasn't honestly until I picked up the bow where I really hunted as hard as I did, because with the rifle, the truth is you're really nonchalant. You're like, I'm going to pick a vantage point. I'm going to sit here. If something pops out, it's cool. But when you are hunting with a bow and you are chasing bugles, it forces you to go through the deepest, darkest holes, the thickest timbers, trying to find these bulls, because essentially you got to get right on top of them, right? Like, you're not going to shoot an elk far away with a bow. So in 2017, the first year I picked up a bow, I was out there a lot. 2018, I did it 2 years in a row. I did archery. And through those 2 years, I just had such good knowledge about this one particular area. Like, I knew game trails, I knew bedding areas, I knew clear cuts, I knew all of that simply from just being out there. I mean, in 2017, 2018, those 2 years I did archery, our season's about 10 to 12 days long, anywhere around there for archery season. And I'm doing like anywhere from 120 to 140 miles in that season. Like, you're just burning boot leather trying to find these elk. In 2019, I switched over to rifle. But in archery season, my cousin Kong, he did archery, and I just wanted to be a buddy, so I went with him. I called in a bull, 6-point. He killed it, okay? He killed a bull in that drainage in 2019. Fast forward rifle season, I end up back in there with a rifle. I kill my first ever bull in that same drainage. So that's 2 bulls in the same season in the one drainage. And at this point, you're like, oh, wow, there's actually elk here. Like, we took 2 bulls out of this one little drainage, because killing 1 elk, that's already a rarity. Killing 2 elk in the same drainage, one with bow, one with rifle, you're kind of onto something if you're killing elk like that in a small vicinity. 2020 comes around, and I did bow, and even though I hunted in that area too, because you're always chasing bugles, you're always mobile. That's the thing about archery. And the Bearded Brothers, they kind of touch on that.
Yeah.
I learned more about the area, didn't figure it out. There was nothing in that little drainage in 2020. So I was like, oh, that's a little weird. 2021 rolls around, and this is spring, and my cousin is out there doing his normal spring, summer scouting stuff. He picks up the sheds to this bull. And he was like, dude, and at that time, we didn't know that this bull existed. Okay, we had no idea about this bull. And so this bull that I ended up killing, Nate gave the awesome nickname of Corkscrew, because his left G2 has a little corkscrew at the end. So that's what we will refer to this big bull as, Corkscrew. And so my cousin matches this bull up, and the sheds are like not even that far apart. Like, they essentially like match right next to each other. And he's just like, he comes home, shows the family, and he's like, see, I told you guys, like, I told you there's bigger bulls up there. Because again, where he had found these sheds is just on the south side of where he and I had killed the 2 bulls in 2019. So he's like, see, I told you, like, this is 2020 shed. So this is from last year. I know there's bigger bulls in here. There's more elk in here. 2021. So he finds that in the spring of 2021. 2021, this is a totally by luck. So I'm bored. Okay. So in 2021, I had a muzzleloader elk tag in Washington. And this is like September 17th or something. So my cousin Joe, he had an archery tag, but I didn't. I remember I was sitting at home. I woke up super late that day. It's like 10 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, I got the day off. What should I go do? And I'm like, you know what I should do? I should go grouse hunting. And so I packed up all my stuff, because my dad and I, we had hunted bear in August that year in this one particular spot. And along the spine, like, we were bumping into grouse like left and right. And I was like, I'm going to go up there. I'm going to go blast these grouse. I'm going to make an epic catch and cook for grouse. So I drive myself all the way out there. And at this point, I'm on a solo mission. Like, I didn't even talk to my family. I had no idea who was out. Just went up there, and I start going up there, and I work my way through a cross, and I don't see a single grouse. And I'm like, man, this really sucks. I wasted my time coming up here. So I work my way like 4 miles into the back drainage, and I'm just sitting there, like, kind of like, well, this is a total waste of time. Like, I'm out here, no grouse, no nothing. And so eventually I make my way back to the truck, and it's about evening. It's about 5 o'clock. And so I basically come back home. I'm just strictly planning day hunting. And as I'm driving back down on the main dirt road, I run across my uncle Blong, which some of you might have seen him shoot his bull last year in 2024. And he's parked off the side of the road, and he's just outside of the truck glassing this little drainage, this little clear cut. And I recognize him. He recognizes me. I stop. I pull over. I talk to him. And I'm like, oh, what are you doing here? Because I know he doesn't elk hunt. And he's like, oh, Joe's out here with the archery tag. So Joe's dad and me, meaning my uncle, we're just out here kind of being his partner. And I was like, oh, that's fine. And then, you kind of do chit chat. And I just told him, like, well, I'm going to go home, because in 2 days, I was going to go hunt with my buddy Nick for bear. And my uncle was like, we would really love for you to go and share camp with us so that Joe actually has a partner. And I'm like, I really don't want to, because I didn't pack anything. I packed literally bare necessities to just do a day hunt. And he's like, it's all good. Like, we got all the food you need. Basically what happened is my 2 uncles were just like, dude, we can't keep up with Joe. And we know for a fact, like, Joe can't get to where he wants to hunt because we're holding him back. And he's like, if you're willing, you can go partner up with Joe, because we know you can hike with Joe. And then me and like my 2 uncles will just go and road hunt for grouse or do whatever. And so I sat there, I contemplated, I was like, all right, like, I guess. So I share camp with them. The next day, Joe and I, we pack up and then we hike in. So I'm actually just hunting with Joe, but then my cousin David and his brother, we were hunting the same area, but they were a pair. I was a pair with Joe. And basically, we're going back into this drainage where I killed my first bull in 2019, where we pulled 2 bulls. and where my cousin Kong had found this 6-point shed match.
Mhm.
And Joe and I, this was a 19-mile day, right? We start from the bottom, we go up and around. And so how it works is me, David, Joe, and my other cousin Sean, we're the four of us were hiking up. And as you start going up towards this mountain, essentially the road starts to Y out. So me and Joe, we go left, and my cousin, David and Sean, they go right. And me and Joe, we just go, we're basically what we said was, we're going to go back to where my cousin Kong killed his bull in 2019. We're going to go work that entire ridge. As Joe and I, we were blindly walking, like an hour after we split, David and Sean were like standing on the side of this road. And right below them is like a clear cut. It's not even a cut, it's just like an open face. Only about 100 yards, and this just goes into dark timber. And they're standing there, not really thinking much, and they rip a bugle. And like right below them, like just it barely in the timber, bull pipes off. And they're like, oh, there's a bull right below us. And so David's the shooter, Seong's the camera guy and caller. David's like he's literally like pulling an arrow out to knock on his bow. And Seong's trying to get further back to try to call the bull past. And they don't even get in position. And sure enough, like this bull is already coming out of the timber, like just a giant 6-point, like coming out of the timber, bugling his head off, like looking at where this other bull is at. And David has this bull like at 70 yards, like quartering to, didn't have a shot. And he's just like standing there. David's just having to stare down. I mean, the bull has no idea. Like he doesn't see my two cousins. Mm-hmm. Like he's just like looking. He's just bugling, like where are you at? Like show yourself. And David's just looking. I mean, it's so open you can't do much. And then that bull eventually, he just turns and just goes back into the timber. And then my cousin David, they were trying to call me and Joe, but we had no service. So me and Joe were just off in La La Land. So me and Joe, we eventually get to basically that ridge where Kong killed in 2019. And we're working down this ridge and we're coming back and it's just like barren, like no sign of elk, no bugles, no nothing. And so essentially what happens is like me and Joe are making this giant loop, this giant circle. And then we eventually come back and meet David and Sean, right? And they were like, dude, where are you guys? Like, we've been trying to tell you, like, get in contact with you all day, dude. Like, there's an elk right here. And we're like, okay, see, this is how rare it is in Northeast Washington. Elk encounters are so rare that we just like to, like, make up stories of, like, oh, we were in elk today. But then reality, you were never in elk. So we were like, I don't know if David's pulling our leg, if they were actually in elk, or if they're just, like, trying to get us hyped. Because sometimes that's what you do. It's like when it's so dead, you have to, like, make up these weird stories to, like, kind of encourage each other again. And so I'm like, I don't think he's actually telling us the truth. And so finally, he's like, dude, like, I'm not kidding. Like, we pulled them up this morning. So me and Joe were like, what the heck, then let's go. So we run all the way back. And it's probably like 3 o'clock by now in the afternoon. Joe and I, we've already done like 16 miles to get back there. We get there, we call, and on the road, because essentially you're hunting roads, it's like, it's so dry that year, like it's just powdered dust on the snow. And David and Seong's boot tracks that they had originally walked had elk tracks stepping on top of them. And I'm like, oh, okay, so maybe they weren't actually lying at this. So David and Sean were like, all right. So we got back to where they had called that bull that morning. And they were like, you know what, we're just going to go down. Like, we don't want to go anymore. And so me and Joe were like, all right, well, we haven't seen anything any day. So we're just going to kind of follow these elk tracks and see where they lead to. So essentially how it works is like we're on the south-facing slope. And basically, imagine we're on the south-facing slope of this one little ridge or this little mountain. Joe and I were going to make a giant loop to the backside of that mountain, and then it's a little drainage. And then there's another mountain to the right. That far mountain to the right was where Joe and I did our loop. So we basically skipped out in that middle section. So we come back, and it starts raining. And we look at the elk tracks, and we're like, dude, like, you can just tell, man. When you track elk, like truly follow tracks, you really start to learn what's really, really fresh and what's like okay fresh. Mm-hmm. And when we were starting to get close, I was like, Joe, I feel like they're just right here. So now Joe and I, we're on the road, but it's no longer a clear cut. It's just dark timber to the right, dark timber to the left. And finally, I'm like, all right, we should probably start calling. So I rip a bugle, and sure enough, like 200 yards in front of us, like in the super thick overgrown stuff, out comes like a little squeal bugle. Not a full-blown bugle, just like a very small squeal. Me and Joe, we look at each other. We're like, what? That's an elk. So we set up, we call again, and sure enough, it is an elk. But it is so thick, all you see as he's coming down, so he's above the road. We're on the road. He's coming down towards the road. It is so thick, you don't see anything. You just kind of see the top of the bushes moving. And I'm like, dude, he's about to walk down into this road and Joe's about to arrow this bull. But being the big bull that he is, he stops about 10 yards shy of the edge and he just goes quiet. And we stand there for about 30 minutes. And we're losing light fast. It's raining. And so to paint the context, we're on the south-facing slope, but it is thick timber. On the other side, if you go to the north-facing side, it is all clear cut. It's wide open. And so we're sitting there after like 30 minutes of nothing happening because we didn't know where the bull went. It was just like vanished. And I looked at the time. I was like, Joe, we have like 40 minutes left of light. We need to go run to the backside and look at this clear cut because that's a spot where basically we've seen elk in the past. So we run around. The moment we popped out, I look up there, there's 3 elk. And sure enough, it's 2 cows and it's this bull. It's Corkscrew. This is 2021. I look up there, we're like 300 yards away and we're running out of light. And basically how it is like me and Joe are standing at the bottom. We're looking up 300 yards. And basically Joe was like, you know what? Like this is last ditch effort. So we backed up, we went into the timber and we were going to sneak our way up along that timber edge line, get close, try to call him across. And so Joe, we go up there and we're fighting last light and it's so thick, I can't see anything, but I'm just like, this is all you. So Joe goes basically just where he can see the elk in the clear cut. I'm like 10 yards in the brush. I rip a challenge bugle and one of his cows starts beelining it towards us. And in Northeast Washington with a bow, it's any elk. And so my cousin Joe's like getting ready. And so he knocks. And the moment that cow came running, like this bull, I never saw it, but Joe was like, the moment I ripped a bugle and that cow came running, he turned and he started running towards us. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then what happened? And he's like, and then the cow stopped. And then the bull basically rounded her up again, pushed her back towards the other cow. And he just kind of stayed in that middle ground between us and the cows. They stayed there for the night. We ran out of light. We snuck our way out. Joe tried to convince me to stay the night again so we could go after him. But I was like, dude, I already told my buddy Nick that I was going to go hunt with him. So I backed out. I left him, killed the bear with Nick the following morning. That's all I really thought about Corkscrew. Never really thought about him again. Fast forward to 2022, rifle season, second day of season. I go back into that drainage. I'm not thinking anything about this. And the one thing you have to understand about these elk is kind of like our whitetail podcast we did last week. They don't have a very big home range. These elk, especially these mature elk, once they find a hidey hole, they sit tight, and that's typically where they are. Because where we hunt, like if you look at the Selkirks in Northeast Washington, there's not enough topography difference to really push an elk out. They will winter in the same spots that they summer, where they rut. You know, they might have these little pockets that they might pivot towards depending on the season, but in general, they have that home range year round. So I go back into the same spot where I killed my bull in 2019. And this is the second day. My cousin Daniel, my cousin Changy, they were sitting in this drainage the day before. They saw some elk tracks. And then I hunted a different spot. We came back to camp. And Daniel and Chang were basically like, we're not going to go back up there. And I'm like, well, somebody has to go back up there. Like, that's our best odds of killing an elk. So me and my cousin Sue were like, well, we will go up there if nobody wants to go because it is quite a hike. A lot of people don't want to go sit there because it's a hike. And so next morning, I drive to the gate. Me and Sue, we hike up there. First thing on there's just a road littered with elk tracks. And I'm like, these are bull tracks. And so I'm sitting there. My cousin Sue, he decides to leave me. He's like, well, if you want to cover this, there's no point for us to both watch it. So he's going to go back one ridge over and look at another cut. And so we spend about an hour there. As he's working his way back, I'm overlooking the cut where Joe and I had seen the bull in the year prior. So I'm literally glassing that open face from like 600 yards away. And my cousin Sue, he's like way down the drainage and he's working his way back up towards me. And as he's coming back, he spots a cow down in the valley, right? And he hits me. I was like, dude, there's a cow down here. You should come down here. And again, with how rare it is to see elk in Northeast Washington, I was like, I would really love to see an elk. I don't care if it's a cow. I don't care if it's anything. My video completely sucks at this point. Like, there's nothing, right? So I pack up. I go down there, and it's like 9 o'clock in the morning. And this valley is very small. It's about 400 yards wide. It's just super thick down in the bottom. And the thing we have learned in the past is that basically where Sue and I were sitting, that is often a travel corridor that these elk used. To paint the picture better, you have this long ridge to the left, and that is where Kong killed his bull in 2019. You come down one little dip and then up over this little mound or this ridge, dip into the second valley over, and that's where me and Sue are sitting right now. And that valley right there is where I killed in 2019, right? So Kong killed to the left, I killed one to the right over. And in 2019, I had killed a bull that was working his way from where Kong killed to go into the basin that we are now sitting at, if that makes sense. And so we're sitting there, long story short, it's about 1 o'clock, and I look back up where I was originally glassing, up towards this cut where we had seen corkscrew in 2021, and out comes these two hunters, right? And I'm like, what the heck? Like, there are people up there? Like, how the heck did they get up there? Well, it turns out they were camped up there. And so I'm like, okay, like, again, obviously I didn't know. I saw them at that point. And as I'm looking at these guys coming down that open clear cut, down below we can just hear sticks breaking. And I'm like, there's elk down here. Like, I just need to sit these guys out. And so I'm sitting there, I'm looking across, and the road that those guys are walking essentially cuts parallel across the ridge right on top of where those elk are. The guy comes over, maybe 150 yards above where we had last seen that cow. He eventually disappears. An hour later, he comes out, he pops next to me. We talk. And he's like, we're going to go back. Or he tells me, we're camped up top. We've been camped up top for 2 days, but we haven't seen anything, so we're going to go up and pack it out. And so at this point, I'm like, great. Like, this guy literally just walked right through where I was thinking the elk were going to show up. 3 hours later, I'm literally on my phone because I'm so bored. And I'm like literally sat there for like 10 hours. I'm watching the Seahawks play the New York Giants because that was the season that we had gotten rid of Russell Wilson. So everybody's thinking that the Seahawks are total trash, right? But we were first in the NFC West. So this was like a giant matchup. So I'm literally watching the Seahawks play the New York Giants live on my phone.
I think you probably just shocked like most of the people that you're a football fan.
I'm not a fan, but I do watch. I do stay up to date. But yes, I remember I'm sitting there. And it's like 4 o'clock. The wind's starting to pick up. It's overcast now. And like you can start to say like the sunlight is starting to fade. And I remember I'm looking at my phone. And throughout the day, I'm on my phone. I look up glass in the little valleys and whatnot. And then this one time, I'm looking at it. We're up by like 3. The New York Giants are on the drive to basically win the game, right? So I'm like really into this game. And then I look up and then down towards the bottom where it's super thick, but just right past where it gets really thick, where it kind of opens up a little bit, I see a black dot. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure that black dot wasn't there earlier. So put the phone down, get my binos up. I'm glassing. I'm like, oh, that kind of looks like a bear. And basically what I'm looking at is I'm looking at the mane of an elk. So as I'm looking, and this elk is facing directly uphill. So imagine like he's facing directly away. You would be looking at the butt, but it's just that he's angled up. So you see the entire back of his elk. And I see the mane of his elk. And as I'm looking, I'm like, that can't be an elk, right? And the moment that thought crossed, all I see is 2 giant mane beams from his left and right just kind of going back and forth. And I'm like, yo, there's no way. So I'm like, I steady my binos and I'm looking at it. And sure enough, it's this elk. And he's standing facing directly uphill. And he's like reaching up with his mouth to like eat leaves. And so as he's doing that, his 2 tine or his main beams are just waving, like moving back and forth. This is like 350 yards. He's in range. I stand up, and granted, I've been sitting for like 3 hours. I stand up and I literally almost pass out. I remember I stood up. I was like, dude, you need to calm down. You're going to pass out. So I'm like, I'm going to calm down. I throw the binos back up again. And sure enough, like he's just doing his own thing. Has no idea I'm there. And so I'm like, all right, calm down. He's not in a position. You can't shoot him. He's too covered up. I get up. I get my gun ready. I range him. I hit up the walkie-talkie. And I'm like, hey, Sue. Because at this time, Sue had gone back to the backside again to go glass that side. I hit him up. I'm like, hey, Sue, do you hear me? Because in all honesty, I was trying to call Sue back so Sue can shoot him. Because really, he's the one that spotted the elk first. And so I hit him 3 times through the walkie-talkie. And he actually heard me, but his walkie-talkie was on such low volume, he had no idea who was talking. So he just completely ignored it. And so I'm calling, and he doesn't respond. And so I'm like, all right, sucks for you. So I turned off the walkie-talkie and threw it down, ranged him, got my gun ready, and I'm set up, threw the camera on him. And at this point, I'm just waiting for this bull to step out. And I was nervous that he wasn't going to step out because there was one shooting lane essentially that I had. Everything was super thick. And basically, he eventually comes out. He walks out into this one lane. I'm all set up, 350 yards. And this is one of the dumbest mistakes I have ever done. This basically should have costed me this elk, but luckily the stars lined up. He's 350 yards, and he's broadside to me now. And he walks out, and all I have is his right shoulder. So he's facing to my right. And in between me and him, there's a twig. Like there's not just a twig, but like those pines, like those green pines. And I was like, there's a pretty stiff wind blowing up the valley. And I was like, I'm gonna try to thread this shot and make the wind push my bullet to miss that twig. And I shoot, right? He steps out, he puts his arm forward. I could see that crease. I shoot. All I see in the scope is I see him like react, like he's waving his head back and forth. And he just takes off down the ridge or down into the valley. I'm like, he reacted like he got hit. And so Sue hears the gunshot. Sue comes running back over to me, and I'm like, dude, I just shot a monster, and I think it's a good hit. We're standing there talking literally for like 10 minutes, maybe even 15 minutes. And we're just like in shock. I'm explaining him how everything's going. 15 minutes later of me and Sue just talking super loud, we look about 100 yards to the bottom left of where I had originally shot him, and there's an elk standing there. And I remember I'm like still explaining stuff, and Sue's just like, oh, dude, there's an elk right there. And the moment he said that, I'm like, you got to be kidding, because I wasn't even that confident about my shot. I just thought I hit him. I throw the binos up, and sure enough, it's the bull. And he is booking it down this ridge. I had no shot, so the first thing I did was I went for the camera, and I got a small glimpse of him running down that ridge. And in my first thought, I was like, is this a different bull? Like, did I kill a bull and this is a different bull? But at the same time, like, it is so rare here in Northeast Washington to have two bulls of that caliber. He runs down. Me and Sue scramble. I run straight down. Essentially, I'm trying to intersect this bull down at the valley, which is the dumbest thing ever because it's so thick down there. You can't see. And so Sue's staying up high. And as I'm running down there wearing my puffy pants, Sue's up on the road. And what the bull did was he went down, and we last saw him go down. But then he eventually cut his way back up. And now he's basically just walking across the wide open clear cut. I had no idea. I'm thinking he's in the thick stuff. So Sue, looking at this bull, is trying to find a place to lay down and shoot this bull because it's like 500 yards. And he's literally watching this elk trot out of his life. Like, there's a timber edge about 300 yards away, and this elk is headed straight towards it. And it's like one of the biggest bulls you have seen. And Sue's like, I can't get a spot to set up. So I get down to this gut, and luckily there's a super old four-wheeler road, and there's one giant tree, like a giant pine tree just randomly standing there. And I remember I'm looking there. I'm like, dude, family's going to rip me, bro. Like, everybody's going to be on my case that I did not kill this bull. And as I'm standing there, just completely defeated, I look up, like miraculously just look up. And sure enough, this elk is in the middle of the clear cut, like 200 yards, just walking at this point, like speed walking at this point across that clear cut. And I'm like, holy crap, he's right there. So I look at this random miraculous tree in front of me. I run to it. There's a branch. I set my gun up on it. And I'm like, all right, make this count. He's walking to the left. I put the gun on his shoulder, or the cross is on his shoulder. I let the gun rip. He goes over the horizon. I don't see it. Sue's watching the whole thing happen from the top. I run back up top, basically on the verge of crying at this point, basically just gave up on the shot. Because even on that second shot, I wasn't too confident that I actually hit him. I get up there, and Sue's like, dude, he ran behind this tree, and he hasn't come out. And I'm like, okay, which tree is it? And he's like, I have no idea. There's so many little trees around. So basically, we waited for like an hour. We made our way all the way around. Dropped down to where we thought he was, used OnX, tracked everything. Basically just said, you know what, we can't find it. Because we spent like 45 minutes in the pitch black trying to find this out. We can't. And we're like, you know what, let's go back out, grab the family. We'll all come back in grid. On our way out, I'm like, I need to go check over here because I don't think we went far enough. I come back up. I have a headlamp on my head. And so the headlamp is essentially beaming anywhere I look. And I remember I'm standing on this game trail, like this super old game trail, and I'm looking down. And as I'm looking down, I swing my head to come back and look up top. And as soon as like my headlight or my flashlight hits in front of me, like there's like something that shines in the dark. But I'm whipping my head, so like it was just like a super like flash pop. And I'm like, oh, that's weird. So I, strain my head. I'm looking down at the ground, and sure enough, there's something glowing. And I'm like, what the heck is that? And sure enough, I'm looking at his eye reflecting my headlight. And the moment I looked at it, this is like starting to settle in. I like kind of tilt my head up, and sure enough, I just see his giant left main beam like hanging out of the air, and I lose it. Like I just start bawling, like I'm crying like a little baby. No, before I did that, I yelled for Sue and I lost it, just to let Sue know that I found him. I lost it, went up to him. Sure enough, he's dead. And the second shot was perfect. Never hit him on the first shot. Got super lucky with that second shot that he gave me another opportunity. I was shooting a 6.5 PRC with a 140 grain ballistic tip. And from where I hit him the second time to where he essentially died was like 30 yards. Wow. He did not go very far, right? And so that's the story of Corkscrew in a little bit more detail, right? And so in this moment, I had no idea that this was the same bull that Joe and I saw in 2021. I'm just thinking like, oh, this is just another 6-point bull. The next morning when we come back and we had the whole family come back out, Joe actually wasn't hunting with us because Joe's mainly a bow hunter. He was actually at home. But then my uncle, which is Joe's dad, called him and was like, hey, we need your help to come pack out. So Joe drove all night, or not all night, but he woke up super early in the morning, met us at the gate. And the moment we walked up to the elk, Joe looked at this elk. He's like, dude, that's the bull from last year. And the moment he said it, I was like, no way. Like, there's no way this is the same bull. And sure enough, he has a screenshot saved on his phone because it's like almost haunting him at this point. Mm-hmm. And he's like, dude, like look at his left main beam. Like, because if you look at his left main beam, he kind of has this very distinct swoop. It's not a whale tail that just bows straight down. He kind of has that little U swoop. Mm-hmm. And he's like, dude, that's the same exact characteristic. And so long story short, it is the same bull. And the craziest part is I killed him 450 yards from where Joe and I saw him in 2021. Wow. 2021, September, I killed him October 30th, 450 yards apart. Crazy. That's when I actually started believing of saying these elk are actually resident. Yeah. Like they don't move as much as people think. That's a super long story. But the reason why I elaborated it is because I don't have many elk stories to share like that in Northeast Washington. Yeah. And so I wanted to give a little bit more detail because it's not as simple as just saying, yeah, I went out there and shot an elk. It's like there's so much context that went into this particular hunt, this elk. Now, that's when it works out. You and I know, and many of us know that most of the time you go out there, you don't see nothing. You don't even see sign. You don't even see tracks, which is kind of why we want to make this podcast for those of you who might be chasing elk in this region during the season. Because, yes, as difficult as it is, you might get lucky once in a blue moon and find a bull like this. Or if you're like Clay and Cole, then you pass these bulls and you shoot like 350 class bulls, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, obviously the story is incredible. What an experience for Northeast Washington. And I think at some point you even had a biologist reach out to you too, right? And talk to you about the density of this class of elk in this part of the state.
So he could be a biologist, but he's not. He's actually just my buddy Jacob. Oh. Jacob's a nerd. Okay. Jacob is a nerd. He's all about analytics and statistics, right? So after I killed the bull, I sent it to him, out of his own free will and free time. He decided to go do a study about the elk herd here in the Selkirks. That's what we hunt, the Selkirk herd. And he's like, according to my research, there is one mature bull elk per every 40 square miles. And he's like, and you killed one. And obviously that number is a little bit skewed, right? Because it's like some elk do congregate in certain areas and some areas a little bit more void. But according to his research, that's what he found. And he's like, there's one mature bull elk per 40 square miles.
Few and far between.
Very few and far between. And that's why he was just trying to gas me up,
Yeah.
There were some people like trying to say, oh, that's not the hardest elk hunt you can do. Like, keyboard warriors and whatnot. And then Jacob came at my defense. He's like, dude, here's the statistics of like how rare it is to kill a mature bull elk in this region. And he just kind of broke it down. I'm like, I appreciate you. But yeah, he's not a biologist, just a complete nerd.
Well, folks, on the flip side of that, there's my 2024 elk season.
Oh, it was a great one.
That was a heck of a season. So I hike into a spot fairly close here, same Selkirk mountain range, and hunting an area where the elk are fairly migratory and where there's quite a bit of private. And so what happens during the season is the elk will move anywhere from 5 to 7 miles, and it's a pretty big herd. So if you're in them, you're in them. If you're not, you're not. And I spent the last 4 or 5 days of season backpacked in hunting. So this was actually in a spot where Samong, like 4 days prior to season, had seen a couple pretty stud bulls.
Double drop tine bull.
Double drop tine bull, yeah. And that, I think about him a lot. And so I go in there thinking, how much could the elk move in 4 days? And to
your rude awakening.
To my rude awakening, they can move, and it was still Northeast Washington that I was hunting. I spent my 4 days in there. Never saw a fresh track. Never saw a fresh sign. Spent 9 to 11 hours glassing each day, however long the daylight is during that time. And obviously never saw the bulls. Up on a high vantage that morning with that area, there's a lot of private property elk harvest. So opening morning, within the first 25 minutes of shooting light, I heard 13 gunshots. Now, given you can say whatever you want, whether those were gunshots at elk or whether someone was shooting, I would have bet that they were gunshots at elk. But that is what most of us here experience, including Samong, outside of this story, on a year-to-year basis. The sightings are few and far between, and finding even elk sign is few and far between. And so whether you're hunting a resident herd or whether you're hunting a migratory herd, migratory kind of being in quotations, not going, summer range to winter range, but just having a much larger home range. Mm-hmm. And then whether you're hunting back country or front country, if you're not playing the private game, it's going to be a tough hunt. It's going to be the toughest hunt that you do over the counter in Washington.
Exactly. And I say that every single year. And as I prefaced at the beginning of the podcast, this is the hardest hunt I do every year. And most of the time, I'm eating tag soup.
Yeah. And this is this is no way to discourage people from getting out. Get out. Elk are harvested every year in Northeast Washington. It happens. Obviously, it happened to you. It's just not at the success levels of some other hunt. It's not at the success levels of white-tailed deer like we were talking about last week. Yeah. But you also absolutely cannot shoot an elk if you're not out there.
This is a hunt where over the years I've learned to have my approach with it, which I will elaborate on it a little bit more. My family, we've had our fair share of success here. Like, I'm not as bleak as Nate and I might make this hunt sound. Like, my family's been relatively successful. Like, on average, if you averaged it, like, we take about 1 to 2 elk out of this region every single year. Inside the family, not myself strictly. It's like someone in my family is usually tagging an elk.
And you have a pretty big family.
Yeah, with deer, you have a bigger group. With elk, it's usually the people who are a little bit more serious about hunting, because everybody deer hunts, right? But not everybody who deer hunts elk hunts. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to my family specifically, like, there's maybe only about, 7 to 10 of us that take elk hunting seriously. And within that 10 or so people, like, somebody is usually getting an opportunity in this region. Now, with that said, that doesn't mean that you're always going to have an opportunity if you have a bigger party. But it's just like one of those things where it's like, yes, it's hard, very hard, but it's doable, and I'm living proof of that, right? You killed a spike your first year archery hunting in this region. So It's not like it's out of the ballpark, but the main thing that we're trying to get at here is it's a hard hunt. And when a hunt is hard, there are certain things that I do pre-hunt to prepare myself for that hunt. One of the most obvious one is scouting. Preseason scouting, summer scouting, it will do you largely a benefit. The other one is really mentally than anything else. So on this hunt, every single time I go on a Northeast Washington elk hunt, regardless of the weapon of choice, I go in with the mindset that I'm never going to see anything. I'm not going to kill anything. And when I do that, as negative as it may seem, it does so much for me because, like, if I'm out there and I'm not seeing anything, I don't get discouraged. Versus if you go out there and you're like, I'm going to kill an elk, and you go out there for 6 days and you don't see an elk, and it's like, this hunt sucks. There's no elk here. I'm going home. And if you have listened to our podcast in the past, we had this saying where we said, who kills the animal? The people who stay out there. And that's all it is. Basically, you're just trying to play your mind games where you're just doing everything to sit yourself out there so that you don't give up prematurely. That's all I do, because the elk that I killed in 2019, basically in the same drainage. Okay, here's another thing. Where my bull died in 2019 and where this bull died in 2022 were 280 yards apart. Okay.
Oh.
I killed him basically in the same thing. It's just that the 2022 bull, my big bull, he died on the north-facing side. My 2019 bull died on the south-facing side, just right across from each other. What did I do in that mindset? I had this mindset where I'm just going to go and sit. And I'm going to sit here for as long as it takes. I will sit here all week if I have to, just to make sure that if anything runs by here, like, I can have a shot at it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what worked. It was day 2019, that rifle hunt. My two uncles sat in that spot for like 5 days. But that in 2019, I was still in college, so I couldn't hunt every single day. I hunted the weekend. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I had school. Thursday, I showed up. My uncle has been hunting that spot for 5 days. He hasn't seen anything but besides some tracks. I show up Thursday or Wednesday night, and my uncle's like, man, I'm getting really tired of hiking up there, because he's older and it's a far hike. And he's like, with your fresh legs, you can go sit up there. I go and sit up there 10 o'clock in the morning. I kill my bull. So to me, it was my first time sitting there for the hunt, for the season. But if you looked at it from how many people that sat there, that's 6 days of sitting in that spot before an elk walked through. And that's a rarity. Sometimes you sit there all week, nothing comes through. But what am I saying here? Patience. That's the biggest thing. If you want to kill elk here in Northeast Washington, patience is going to be your biggest attribute. Referring back to the story I killed Corkscrew, that guy that basically walked right over him and his herd, they left.
Mm-hmm.
And I sat there and I shot the bull. That's all it is. It basically, you have to understand this. And even with my trail cams, and Nate can probably, attest to some of this, I'll have some of my reveal cell cams out in the spot. And I might get an elk like once every 6 weeks. Now, does that mean that they're never in the area? No, that just simply means, if you put it from a racial perspective, it takes quite a bit of time before an elk rolls through one particular spot.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it means. So when it takes them that much time, what does it mean as a hunter? Spend as much time as you can sitting at a spot. That's all it is. It sounds so simple, but man, this took me so many years of trial and error to finally just learn, like, hey, just sit down.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you find some sign in the area, just sit down. Sometimes you don't even get to that spot. You don't even find sign, right? But once you find sign, don't leave elk or elk sign to try to go find elk or find elk sign, right? That's the biggest one I have.
I think patience is a big one. And you just incorporated this into it, but it's not necessarily time wasted if you're sitting and glassing a spot with no elk sign, because the elk maybe could come back through there. But this is so obvious, but it tells you a lot about the elk in the area. You can see if they came in through last night, or you can see if they came in through maybe a couple weeks ago. But like you said, if I'm elk hunting during the rifle season and I spend a lot of time hiking, I spend a lot of time walking roads, and looking at ridges, kind of some of these known travel corridors, ridges, water sources, any wallows that I know of, and then obviously the roads themselves. And if I do get the opportunity to come across fresh elk sign, that is, to me, 90% the way there of finding elk.
Exactly.
Last year, when I spent those 4 days out, I spent those 4 days hunting and never saw fresh elk sign once.
Yep.
Now I'm not saying that you won't, you will never see elk if you don't find sign first, but finding sign is such a big step to finding the elk, and a lot of times a more mobile tactic can be very helpful. So unless you're going into an area with a pretty intimate knowledge of it, like you have with this area, your family has hunted there for the last decade plus, you guys have harvested elk in this area, you know there's resident bulls, all of that. Being mobile is going to be your friend. And even in your stories, there was fresh sign there prior to you sitting there. So one way that you can approach it is boots on the ground, burning leather, and just move until you find sign. If you find sign, until you can't anymore, and then maybe post up and find somewhere where you can glass a bigger area that either you're not able to walk or you don't have enough energy to walk, to kind of break up the monotony a little bit. But being mobile, putting in the groundwork until you come across that is going to be something that's going to help put you ahead of people.
Yeah, and I got real life evidence of that because my dad is not very fond of sitting around and doing nothing. He is a hiker. And he complains a lot, but he's a hiker. And I will give him that. So in 2021, my cousin David, he had a few trail camps set up in this one particular drainage. And during the September season, which is the rut, or what I would deem more as like a pre-rut in this region, he had this one particular bull. It was just like a little raghorn, and he had like 3 cows or something. And they were frequenting this one little bedding area because that's where he had his trail cams. And we've known about the bedding area, so it wasn't like a random spot. But that particular season, we had this 5x5 or whatever with a couple cows. And in 2021, I had a muzzleloader tag, so I didn't even get to do the rifle hunt. And my dad and my 2 cousins, my uncle, they decided to go and hunt that area where he had set up the trail cams in archery season. And it was super foggy that morning. This is like day 6 or something for my dad. And my dad's been hiking for like 6 days. And he's like, my feet's killing me. He's already given up, right? But my uncle and my cousins, like, they're just always the most positive people. And they're like, well, you can just go with us. So my dad's just like walking the road. And sure enough, he finds that bull in the middle of a clear cut. And that bull it just was meant to be, because by the time my dad saw that bull, the bull was already booking it over this ridge, right? So the moment he saw big antlers, bull's gone over the ridge, my dad's like trying to run to chase this elk, right? It's like 300 yards away. So my dad's like running up this road. And then as he's like running up this road, he looks back up there, and this elk is now like, basically the elk has come back and is peeking over this giant rock looking at my dad. And my dad's like, what the heck? That's weird. So my dad just pulled up on a rock and settled up and shot that elk. Now, the significance of that is, yes, you could have sat on that clear cut and potentially shot him there. But with where my dad had killed that bull to where the trail cams were, you would have not guessed that he was going to be that far away. It took somebody who was mobile, like actually actively covering that country, to run into that bull. Because my cousin David and my cousin Xiong's the one who had the tag. They were sitting up on this ridge overlooking where everybody would have thought that the elk was going to be feeding in. But my dad, because he just couldn't sit still, he's just like, I'm going to go over here. Walked right up to him.
And there's a lot of spots in this area of the state. They don't pick where to do forest cuts based off of areas that you can glass into them. So there is so many areas that are clear cut or thinned cut or whatever it is that have regen that these elk like for feeding, that you won't see unless you're either hiking through them or hiking right above at the top of them or right at the bottom.
Yep. And so some of the things that I guess I want to touch on is like, how do I actually look for these elk? So elk, like deer, they feed a lot in clear cuts. They need that new growth. But how I approach a clear cut is very different from an elk to a deer. With the deer, the younger the clear cut, the better, because deer are smaller, and there comes a point where the clear cut's too overgrown, you can't really see a deer. But because elk are much bigger, it gives you a little bit more time to hunt over a clear cut. One of the things that I have learned over the years is the thicker that clear cut is, the more the elk like that clear cut. Because one, they have way more feed because it's just luscious and there's a lot of vegetation that's growing. But on top of that, they also have this sense of security that they're not just being completely exposed in a wide open clear cut. So, for example, like the clear cut that, it's not even a clear cut, this little drainage that I'm assuming was a cut back then, severely overgrown, and that's where I shot this bull. And not only was it a feeding area, they were bedding in that stuff because they know with how thick that stuff is, nothing is going to approach them. Or if something is approaching them with how many sticks and brush and leaves are in the way, they're going to hear it.
Yeah.
Right? So that's what I'm looking for. When it comes to this region, overgrown clear cuts. And when I say overgrown, it sounds vague, but the reason why I can't really put an age to it is because different clear cuts, depending on how much sunlight they get and the direction that they're facing, they grow at different speeds. Mm-hmm. So you can have a very overgrown 5-year-old clear cut and one that's kind of just mediocre, right? So it's hard for me to say like, oh, look for this age class. No, if you look at it and you're like, if there's an elk standing there and I could probably hardly see it, that's probably a good clear cut. If it's a clear cut where you're like, oh, if there was a turkey or any rabbit over there I can spot, those are typically the ones where the elk kind of just maneuver through. Like they might mill around for a little bit, but they're not really going to stay there, right? So last year, referring back to your hunt, like 4 days when I was in there, I mean, they were like, just think about how perfect this timing was. We hunted there day one, no elk sign. We came back out, we camped. The next morning, we went in there, saw the 2 bulls, and saw their tracks, and that was it, right? Like you had to have timed it so perfect for them to be in that open clear cut, because that's clear cut, you've seen it. It's like if there's anything standing in that clear cut, you're probably going to pick it out. Mm-hmm. Like there's hardly any cover, right? And so that's why these elk, they know too. It's like they know when they're exposed. Now, it's not to say that you won't ever catch them out in these wide open clear cuts, but I don't treat those elk that are in those super wide open clear cuts the same as elk that are in like thicker brush, because when they're in thicker brush, I just feel like they move a little slower. There's more feed to hold them up, and they just feel more secure. Whereas when they're in the middle of a giant open clear cut, they really move fast. Man, I've seen them just kind of cruise their way through, like just at a very constant speed, just trying to get through that cut. So with that said, that's typically what I look for. The other one that you can do is you can still hunt, but the one thing I've learned about still hunting for elk here, it takes a long time before you walk up on elk. There are so few elk, so big country, that for you to simply walk right up to an elk, man, the stars really got to line up for you. Yeah. I don't even know if anybody's ever walked up to an elk during rifle season in the dark timber. We've walked up on them with clear cuts and whatnot, but never in the dark timber. And that's over 30 years of multiple people in my family hunting. Now, I'm not saying that it doesn't happen. If you have like you said, if you have intimate knowledge of a bedding area that they might be actively using, it obviously up your odds. But if you're just like blindly still hunting through the timber, like good luck, because it's hard.
Tough. Another thing that I want to touch on too, that might not come as totally as second nature, is because of the timing of this season, which Washington, our elk season, is usually the last couple days of October and the first couple days of November, is most people think, oh, rut's over, bulls aren't bugling, cows don't talk. But elk talk year-round, cows talk year-round, and last year's a good example. The reason that I spent the days that I had in this spot, even though I wasn't seeing sign, is at nighttime I was getting up at 12, 1 a.m. and bugling, and I was getting bugles in return.
Yeah, I remember. Oh, dude, I forgot about that. Yeah, so I took Son out. That's the 16-year-old kid that shot his doe. Mm-hmm. And this was the day. So we saw the 2 bulls that morning. We shot his doe at night. And as we were hiking out, all over the valley. It was just like cow mewing and bugles.
Yeah.
And I hit up Nate. I was like, dude, you should bring your calls in here.
Yeah.
And throughout the night, they were actively bugling. And
Yeah.
this is October like 25th.
Yeah, that's something to keep in mind. I mean, obviously, it's not something that you're going to bank on like you would say during a September archery hunt. But just remembering that if you're glassing the thick stuff, the stuff where, if an elk is walking through, you might not always see it, or you might not see it at all. Use the things like the nighttime. Maybe don't leave your bugle tube at home. That was enough, even though I went through that whole hunt last year without ever laying eyes on an elk, it gave me that little vote of confidence that I was hunting in an area that was maybe going to produce. I wasn't necessarily hunting in an area that was completely desolate of elk, which if I wouldn't have done that and I wouldn't have heard them between glassing the same big drainage for 4 days and not seeing a single bit of fresh sign for 4 days, I would have left that season not knowing if I just spent 4 days looking at an area where elk were 5 miles away.
Yeah.
But because of that nighttime bugling, and it was really only 1 or 2 bugles once, I knew that the chance stood there.
Yeah. And like I said, it's not too common, but occasionally, and that's not the first time we've heard elk bugle that late into October. The first year that we found that basin that we hunted octo in, we heard an elk bugling next to us. And so it's not uncommon for these elk to be bugling. Now we're talking about specifically bugling, but mewing is a year-round thing. Cows are always talking to each other, especially a cow and a calf, and even bulls will mew at each other and whatnot. So never count out calling. At the bare minimum with me, it doesn't matter what I'm doing. If I'm going after elk, I always have a diaphragm with me. So I usually use the Phelps Black Amp. That's the reed that fits me. So I might not always be carrying a bugle tube, but at the bare minimum, if I need to do a cow call, I can do it. Or I could just do a bugle without an actual tube.
Yeah.
So that's something that I do encourage people to have, is just some type of elk call. Primarily a reed, because it's weighs nothing. It's super compact. You can just put it in the little pouch of your vinyl harness or whatever. Just kind of leave it there and forget about it. And it's very effective, because we have called in, I've called in elk in that late of season. I mean, I called in a spike bull in 2019 after I killed my bull during the late whitetail season. Pulled them right away from the herd just by cow calling, right? Yeah. It's amazing how easy those elk make it when they know it's not season. After you already worked your butt off trying to kill one, and then, whoa, look, there's a herd right here. But that's basically how I go about it. It's, again, the tactics about it is one thing, but because of how difficult it is one of those things where, like, it's more of time than it is an actual tactic. And that's typically what I do. I just use my eyes more than my actual legs. I'll use my legs to get me to a glassing point in the first place. But then from there, it's kind of just like you let the elk come to you rather than you go to the elk. Unless you're like my dad where you can't sit still. Again, we've killed elk both sides of the spectrum. Yeah. And so I'm not saying that do one or do the other or don't do one. It's like do what fits you. Because occasionally throughout the week, what I actually do is I do a hybrid. There will be times where I sit.
Oh, absolutely. And do it allows you to be persistent and stay out there.
Yep.
Because changing it up, but being out there is better than just being, I guess I can't sit anymore, so I'm going to call it.
Exactly. So with the rifle, man, it's pretty simple. And again, we're really talking about Northeast Washington here. Now, I want to take a step back and look at it from a broader standpoint, because there are places in Washington we do have good elk numbers. But here's the thing about elk hunting in Washington with the general tags. There's always a catch. You can look at it. You can do your research and you're like, man, this spot looks really, really good. But there's usually a but. It looks really good, but there's something about it. So, for example, a lot of times it comes when you're reading the regulations. A lot of people, they come up here in Northeast Washington, they're like, whoa, you could shoot any bull up there? That's awesome. Like, you could shoot any bull,
but you got to find a bull.
Yeah, but good luck finding an elk in the first place, right? You go down to the Blue Mountains. You can only shoot a spike. But you're probably going to see elk every single day. Same thing with the Yakima area, right? Okay, it's a true spike or it's a spike bull only. But you're probably going to be in elk every day.
Yeah.
In Western Washington, there's a 3-point minimum rule. But there's elk around.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like there's usually pros and cons. This is how I dissect the regulations. If the regulations that are liberal with what you can bag means that hunt is usually harder than you think. The regulations where they are more strict means that there's more elk, which is why they're trying to manage it like that. Spike bulls typically have the spike bull legal animal typically occurs in these herd management areas where there's a lot of elk, and they don't want you shooting the big bulls. Here in Northeast Washington, I really consider it an opportunity hunt. It's an any bull hunt because even though they are very liberal with allowing you to shoot any bull, they already know that the success rate is not high enough to actually impact this herd negatively. So that's why when you kill a bull like this, it's just like that shouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
Right? It's really hard, but at the end of the day, we don't want to end this on a bleak note. It can happen, and it does happen.
Yeah.
People kill some studs out of this region every single year. It can be you, right? Like I know, just expanding our circle in the past few years. Like now, it's just like Nate and I, we have really seen just how common people are actually killing elk out of this region. Because it's really easy when you don't have a big circle that elk hunts to just kind of judge the hunt based off of your own experience. If you don't kill something, then that means nobody else is killing something, right? But when you're surrounding yourself with all these people who are actively out there, it's like, okay, this guy didn't kill something, but this guy over here killed something. It gives you some hope.
Yeah, it happens. And, like we've been saying, it can only happen if you're out there and persistent. And so, if that's the best you can do, that's the best Samong and I can do, that's the best you guys can do is spend the time out there and hope for the best and use the tools that you have to your advantage, your glassing and your walking and in your, persistent mindset to your advantage to hopefully find success.
Yeah, and here's the thing. If you guys do your preseason scouting and you guys get like a trail cam photo of, say, a bull that you want to shoot, he might not be in that spot in the fall. Like, for example, like in the summer, I had some bulls on my trail cams. But when it comes to September, October, I'm not looking for that elk in that particular area. I'm probably going to look for that bull somewhere else. Now, again, some of these elk can migrate big time. But I have also learned that there's kind of two different elk here, and we've touched on it. There are some elk that are residents. Once they find their little spot, that's their spot, and their home range is pretty small. There are some elk like yours last year where the double drop time bull, I mean, he was just moving through, and he covered several miles in like 2 days and just doing a giant loop. Like I could just tell he didn't really have a home range that he was, or like a specific spot he wanted to. He was just kind of doing his thing.
And for the whole, to give some magnitude here to elk moving, for the whole length of Eastern Washington, where Eastern Washington borders Idaho, from Canada all the way down to the Washington, Oregon, Idaho corner, those elk will jump between states from pressure. We're talking miles and miles, and creek crossings, small river crossings, highways. They will move significant distance. And so this is a great example with in this area, a lot of the Eastern Washington units, the Mount Spokane 124 unit, the Selkirk 113 unit, these units border Idaho, which also has obviously elk seasons. And based on what weapon that season is in, which usually corresponds to more or less hunters out there and more or less pressure, these elk are very smart and will just hop back and forth depending on pressure.
Yeah. And it's not really that they know there's a border. It's just that they know where the pressure is coming from.
Right.
And this is not just for these two units. It's anywhere that has a bordering unit. Like you can go up to North Central Washington, Canada.
Right.
We have deer that move back and forth, elk that move back and forth. Same thing like Washington, Oregon border, like elk move back and forth.
Yeah.
And so it's just one of those things where like that's something that a lot of people just don't take into considerations. Like, oh, what's actually happening 3 miles down that way?
Well, and there's borders all over, not just state or international borders. Yeah, we have the Washington, Canada borders. We have the Washington, Idaho, and Washington, Oregon borders. We also have the borders of units that are quality units and not quality units. So these are bulls that hop back and forth between, units where they're not pressured as much. Say a spike, where it goes from a unit or a 2x2, where it's a unit that's any bull can then jump into a quality unit where it knows that it's not pressured as much. So take that into consideration. We're not just looking at the outline of Washington with borders, but even within Washington, you have a lot of the central Washington, the southeast Washington. Those have some of their own borderlands, and you can use that to your advantage as well, knowing that, maybe getting a little bit closer to an area with higher density of elk that's a quality unit, but you're still in a unit yourself hunting that's not a quality unit, an over-the-counter opportunity hunt. Again, the catch is lots of people think that, and so usually the hunting pressure goes up. It's never going to be the absolute perfect scenario, but just use that as something to account into your options when you're planning for your season.
You guys might learn that firsthand when you're just like, oh, there's national forest right there, but there's 100 elk in this private property field.
Yeah.
They know that boundary very well.
And that's a lot of animals.
It's a lot of animals, but hey, as much as we bark on not having a lot of elk, there are some good numbers of elk up here. They just tend to be very pocket picky. We have some herds up here. I mean, 50, 60 head, man. You see them mainly on private, but the herds that we typically find on public land, you're looking at 3 to 6. Mm-hmm. They're very small sub herds of the main big herds, and I don't really know the scientific data, but here in Northeast Washington, we have a lot of predators. The main one being wolves, because I think wolves have a bigger impact, in my opinion, on animals around. They're louder. They don't really hide their presence, whereas mountain lions, they're very sneaky and whatnot. When wolves are in an area, the wolves are in an area, and the elk will pick up on that. And so I think a survival situation that these elk have done is they have now broken up into smaller groups, because when you have less elk, you simply leave less scent, less sign, and it's just not as obvious as, say, like a herd of 100 that ran through that drainage.
Yeah. Right?
When there's 2 elk that ran through a drainage versus 100 elk, there's a major difference of what you can tell. So,
and that's also to be said when looking for sign. We're not talking about like you'll see in Montana or Wyoming or Idaho, a road that's looks like a herd of cattle has been driven down it from elk sign. We're talking about, maybe 1 or 2 tracks of elk or 1 pile of fresh sign. That's fresh sign, and that's a gold mine.
Yeah. And I guess with that, I do want to touch, because some people do have questions about wolves. My experience with the wolves is, yes, the elk do take that into consideration, obviously. Like, that's literally life and death. But what I used to think is, like, wolves will run an elk out of an area, and sometimes they do. But sometimes, if an elk knows that he's safe, they hole up.
Mm-hmm.
They zip their mouth. They don't make a sound. They just hole up.
Yeah.
So I've had it happen. I mean, on the flip side, sometimes the elk get ran out, and you don't ever see elk in that area for years.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen both scenarios very personally. I mean, every year we have multiple encounter with wolves. Last year during late season is a good example. Not with elk, but with deer. Actually, no, it wasn't during late season. It was during early modern whitetail. So October time. So this is the same days I was hunting this deer we call Octo, and I watched wolves in that basin 3 out of 3 days. I either watched them, had them with their tracks overlapping my boot tracks, or had them, kind of yapping and barking all around me all 3 days of the season. And although I didn't see the deer I was hunting after those wolves had run through, and I was a little bit concerned about that, season ended, and on my trail cam, that deer popped back up. So he had just holed up during that time.
Yeah.
On the flip side, there's another area that we hunt, which for the last 7, 8, 9 years, every year we go in there to hunt deer. We hike out in the dark, we hear wolves 9 out of 10 nights.
And we've
never seen deer. And this year seems to be the first year that the wolves, at least up until this point, have moved on from that area to some other adjacent basin. And the deer the whitetail, being quick to rebound, are filtering back in.
And there's elk.
I
have not seen elk in that drainage literally in like a decade.
Yeah.
And as soon as the wolves are gone,
the elk are back.
The elk are back in there.
So take them into account. Take predators into account, obviously, but don't let it ruin your hunt.
Yeah.
If you encounter them, because odds are you will encounter them.
Exactly. Well, folks, that's kind of all we got for you guys for this general elk season. It's I wish I had more positive things to say or more hopeful things to say, but we give it to you guys the hard, honest truth. And it's a tough hunt. But as I tell people, man, these tough hunts, as miserable as they might be, they are the most rewarding when
Absolutely.
it comes together, man. Like, I dread this hunt, but I also look forward to this hunt because I know it's going to be most likely a slow hunt. But man, when it comes together, there is no feeling like it. There's no feeling that matches the success of killing an elk here in Northeast Washington. And even though we're putting a lot of emphasis here in Northeast Washington, I think I would go even one step back and say just Washington in general. Short seasons and just tough elk hunting. That's the way it goes. But with that said, we wish you guys the absolute best of luck. If you guys haven't already killed one this season, Nate and I, we're eager to see what you guys are pulling out of these woods, man.
Absolutely.
We love seeing it when you guys send in photos, whether it's through Instagram DMs to Nate or myself, or sending it through an email. But we're going to wrap it up here because that's really all we got for you. But before we go, we want to share with you some fast facts.
I like it. What do you got?
So, this has to do with heart rates.
Okay. Human or animals?
Animals.
Okay.
The average resting heart rate for rabbits is between 130 and 325 beats per minute. Wow. Elk typically have a resting heart rate of about 50 to 60.
Huh.
So I don't know what it is about smaller animals, but for whatever reason, I feel like the smaller the animal, the faster their heart rate gets.
That's very interesting.
I don't know if that's a fact, but according to what I have seen, that's true.
Very interesting.
The bigger the animal, I feel like there's less active pulses, but those pulses are just big.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Interesting.
A fast fact for you.
That's a fast fact. Mine has to do with shed antlers, and in particular, the seal. So I'm going to actually grab an antler here.
The what?
The seal.
The seal?
So the seal, if you guys are watching on YouTube, you can maybe see what I'm pointing out to, and I'll put them both on my camera. So you can tell a lot. This is where the antler meets the pedicle, which is the base of the antler on the animal's skull. And the little white circle here is called the seal. And based on the shape of the seal, you can tell a lot, not necessarily by the age, but by kind of the growth curve that this animal is on. So firstly, let's look at this mule deer shed. If the seal is convex, meaning it's curved outward, that is a really good indicator that that animal has not yet reached its full potential of antler growth, and that it's next year, barring crazy winters and things like that, that the antler growth is going to be greater. A flat pedicle means that that animal's kind of at its greatest maturity as far as antler growth, and then a receding pedicle, which you can see here, or a concave pedicle. So even though it looks a little out, in the middle here, it dips way down in. And that shows that the animal is kind of on the downward side of antler growth. Now, antler growth does not always equate to age, but a lot of times the receding antler growth means much more mature animals.
There's a pattern.
There's a pattern, absolutely.
So to I guess, put in simple terms, if you flip the antler upside down and the pedicle is completely facing up,
Yep.
the more mountainous that it looks, the
Exactly.
younger it is.
So, which is really cool if you find a shed like this, which for Washington, this is a pretty sweet mule deer shed.
That's a slammer.
But it's also extremely, if this would look like a divot in the deer's head, because this antler here, this shed antler, is very convex, which means that this deer, hypothetically, is going to grow for years to come.
He's still young.
Yeah. So that's my fast fact for you guys.
Wow, there you go. So for all you shed hunters out there, pay attention to that pedicle, and you might just learn whether or not he's going to get bigger or not.
Yep. Well, guys, that's it for general season elk this week. Hopefully you enjoyed a little bit longer one. I know the story took up a bit, but, it's fun to share the success stories we do have, because between all the YouTube out there, a lot of times it seems like everybody is always successful. However, that is absolutely not the case, as we have obviously talked about in this podcast. But keep your head up if you're out there for general season elk. Don't let us discourage you. You have got it, and persistence is really what's going to pay off in the end.
Let us be the motivation of you proving us wrong as to why Northeast Washington elk is easy.
Thanks for joining us this week. We'll see you next week.